Hi, Cora Stack here. I just want to talk about the following point here, and I want to talk about this particular topic. Where have the peace movements gone, and why the world needs a new culture of peace? So, this is just following conversations that I have with people. So I reflect and think about what I'm going to talk about. If we look at the world today, or talk to anybody, everybody's talking about war. War is dominating the headlines. From the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, the violence between Israel and the Gaza Strip, the rising tensions now following Iran and the United States, the language of retaliation and escalation and confrontation increasingly dominates global politics. But there is another question we rarely ask, and this is a question I ask myself: where have the peace movements gone? That we had in the past. Where are the millions of voices calling for negotiation, cooperation, and peaceful solutions? When peace movements used to fill the streets in the 60s and the 70s, large peace movements shaped public life. Millions marched during the Vietnam War, demanding an end to violence and greater accountability from governments. During the Cold War, vast public demonstrations called for nuclear disarmament. Citizens organised, marched, and insisted that political leaders pursue diplomacy and cooperation rather than confrontation. These movements were powerful reminders that peace is not passive. It requires active participation from society. So let me just focus on that point again. These movements were powerful reminders that peace is not passive. It requires active participation from society. So why are these voices quieter today, you might ask? Today, the world remains full of conflict and violence, horrific and more horrific. Man's inhumanity to man always stays with me. Yet the large peace movements that once mobilised millions seem far less visible. Several factors might explain this. Media has become more fragmented. Digital activism often replaces physical protest, but it's physical protest. It doesn't mean going on, it means just standing together, in a peaceful protest is what I'm talking about. Modern conflicts are conflict and difficult to understand. Political polarization divides societies, but I think there's a huge amount of fear, and people are just fearful of going from protesting, and this is another very, very concerning situation. And many citizens feel powerless in the face of global crisis. But I also feel they're terrified. People are fearful of protest, even peaceful protest, and this can lead to silence or apathy. But silence carries risk, and also worn down by the pressures of life as well. There's so much, as I say, the risks and the pressures of, the increase, for example, in oil prices and heat and ESB and all of these, education, housing, cost of living, all these things are wearing people down. They haven't any time to engage in civic life in this way, because when voices call for diplomacy and cooperation become quiet, the space for violence and escalation grows. The other point is that conflicts exist at every level of society. Conflict is not limited to international wars, as we know. It appears across many areas of human life, in politics, in workplaces, in communities, and even within personal relationships. Different scale, but often the same dynamics. Competition for power, fear and mistrust, miscommunication, and the absence, in particular, of constructive dialogue. The peace scholar Johan Galtung argued that violence, he has a phenomenal insight here in his work. He has argued that violence can exist not only in physical acts, but also within social systems and structures. I think that's very insightful of Johan Galtung. That's when I heard about him recently. Understanding these patterns help us see that peace building must occur across all levels of society. Conflict is natural, violence is not inevitable. Conflict is natural, but violence is not. Violence is not necessarily inevitable. Disagreement is a normal part of human life. Different perspectives, interests, and priorities will always exist. The challenge is not eliminating conflict, the challenge is learning how to manage it constructively. Healthy societies cultivate the skills of dialogue, compromise, and collaboration. They encourage people to listen, to negotiate, and to seek solutions that allow different perspectives to coexist. When collaboration replaces confrontation, conflict becomes an opportunity for learning and progress rather than destruction. So let's finish by talking about reviving peace building and collaboration. Peace building means creating cultures and institutions that support cooperation rather than domination. It means strengthening mediation, encouraging dialogue, teaching people. I think this is very important. I think there's a lacking of understanding of how important this is, and there isn't enough of it in our education system. Teaching people how to resolve dispute constructively. And if we were to look at the insights of Johann Galtung, he argued that violence can exist not only in physical acts but within social systems and structures. So that would lead you to this point, that we really need to look at how we can teach people how to resolve disputes constructively, and that's needed right across all levels of society. Fostering collaboration across differences. Collaboration is one of the most powerful tools society possesses, and I agree with that. That's very much part of what Harvard negotiation business school are always talking about, the power of collaboration. It allows individuals, communities, and nations to work together to address shared challenges. Without collaboration, disagreements easily become battles. With collaboration, difference can lead to creative solutions. Peaceful societies do not eliminate disagreement. They learn how to transform disagreement into collaboration. Closing, the peace movements of the past remind us of something very important. Ordinary citizens can influence the course of history, but peace cannot survive if it is silent. Peace requires voices. It requires courage. It requires collaboration. The challenge of our time is not eliminating conflict. It is learning once again how to resolve conflict through dialogue, cooperation, and shared understanding. Because peace is not something that simply happens. It is something societies must actively build together. So there's just a couple of points I have about that peace is not passive, that we must work together, that it's something that doesn't happen. It has to be worked on every day, and it is something societies must on a daily basis actively build together.